welcome into the latest edition of ESPN FC. Kay Murray, Shaka Hislop and Olley Moreno here in the studio, and we will start the show by talking about Chelsea. There is a lot to discuss. Let's take a look at some of the ins and outs. It's starting to look like an airport display board of departures and arrivals. Look at all the numbers here, and this is just this summer. The latest confirmed news with the Blues is that Conor Gallagher is out and João Felix is in, and despite having more than 40 first-team players on their books, Enzo Maresca insists it's not a mess.
I'm not working with 42 players. That is something that from outside, I'm working in this moment with 21 players. Today's session is with 20 players. Yesterday's session was with 21. So it's, the other 15 or 20, they're training apart. If they are Chelsea player, 42, 43, yes, for sure. But they are not working with me every day. I don't see them. So it's not a mess like looks from outside. Absolutely not.
Let's now welcome in Aage Fjortoft, and we've also got James Olley, who was actually in that press conference. From what we're hearing there, James, everything's fine at Chelsea. There's nothing to worry about.
Well, what he's trying to do, I think, is control what he can control. And there's clearly a separation of powers at Chelsea. And he has made it pretty clear to us that he is not in control of the ins and outs of the club. Yes, he has a say in transfers. Yes, he gives his opinion on who he wants to use as part of his squad going forward. But, you know, as was the case last year with Mauricio Pochettino when he took charge, some of those decisions have been made prior to the manager coming in. And I think that's certainly the case this time around, Conor Gallagher being the most obvious example of that. Chelsea have been trying to sell him for the last couple of windows. And clearly they've made their decision that he wants to work with, as he said, we've trained today with 20, we trained yesterday with 21. He wants to work with the group that he is going to progress into the season with. And it's quite ruthless and quite brutal to the guys who have been marginalised, because now it's all on the sporting directors, the co-owners, the recruitment staff there at Cobham to get those players out of the door. Because elsewhere in that press conference, he says, well, you know, a lot of clubs have this kind of issue at this time of the year. There might be 5, 6 or 7 players who are in that boat. And he's right. But Chelsea have got 15, maybe more, who they need to shift in the next 10 days. So there's a lot of work ahead of them to make sure this isn't a mess and it doesn't sort of bleed into September and October. And you've got a lot of unhappy, unregistered players on the sidelines causing problems.
What do you think, Olley? Can this function okay, as Enzo Maresca's saying?
I mean, I suppose from his perspective, what else is he going to say? And he is going to indeed protect his own brand and his own players, this 21 players that he's talking about, which, by the way, I don't know how you play 11v11 if you only have 21 players, but neither here nor there. That's just simple math. All right. In any case, apparently we don't play 11v11 anymore in training. The truth of the matter is, and James just alluded to it, is that when you have this sort of situation in which you may have 3 or 4 guys that are out of favor, and those guys go train who knows with whom somewhere else in the training facility. But when the number is 20, it's significant. And so while in his mind he's trying to tell himself that it's not a mess, it is a mess. It is a mess, because all these players that are sort of in purgatory, that are neither here nor there, eventually, somehow, they're going to filter back down to you, because you're not just going to have players making money and not actually working, not actually playing. And so at some point, somebody's going to say, well, if they're not going elsewhere and they're part of Chelsea and they're in Chelsea's books and we're paying their salary, do they have a role? And if they have a role, you have to go to the manager and say, what is the role of this player going forward? So while he may say, I'm only focusing on this 21 players, the reality is that you're not going to be able to move on from 20 other players. And so therefore, something needs to happen in terms of the decision-making that you have to be able to put together a training plan for all these guys that are part of your club.
There's definitely some decisions being made in Maresca's head, and some that seem to have been confirmed in his own head, at least. Here's what he had to say on the situation with Raheem Sterling and Ben Chilwell.
In this moment, they are training apart. As I said already the other day, the situation with both of them is quite clear. We have a big squad, and for me it's impossible to give all of them minutes. So some of them, if they want, they are looking for minutes, probably it's better to leave. And in case they don't leave, they have a contract here and they are Chelsea player. I'm not thinking about how many years contract. It's not my job. If they have 6-year contract, but I don't like them, they can have 20 years contract. I don't care. I'm just here to make the right decision for the team.
It's just a fact of the matter that if you've got a load of professionals who are itching to play, they train all week and the whole purpose is to play, but they know they can't, that is going to create a big, big problem when he tries to re-assimilate them into the group. What they've tried to do is separate it, be quite clinical and say, this is the group we want, this is the group we don't want. And they're saying to those players, you need to go, and, if you want to play, you need to go and find a club. But they've now got to provide a pathway for those players to go from where they are now in the wilderness to trying to find a transfer. And I don't think, as it stands, they're handling that particular element of it very well. But they've got 10 days ahead of them, but they've really got to get to work to move. Again, we're not talking about 3 or 4. We're talking about a dozen, maybe as many as 15 players. They've got to get out the door one way or another in the next 10 days.
Jan, what do you make of all this?
Well, remember the good old days when we worked hard for a place in the team? No, you have to work hard for a place in the dressing room. I mean, things are changing. It's unbelievable. But what I want to say is I think that there is a technical issue. There is a business philosophy. That's fine. But I think what the fans of Chelsea Football Club are concerned, how does this make a performance culture? How does this make the atmosphere in the dressing room when people are not allowed to be around them? Do we think that these 15, 20 players never talk to each other? Who is not there? Yes, I've been at the Chelsea training ground. There's a lot of grounds. There's a lot of coaches around the Premier League teams. But this is bizarre what's going on at Chelsea Football Club at the moment. And it's a disrespect to all their fans. Because there is a business philosophy, it's fine. Just do that. But it's all about being done on the pitch. And yes, I understand Sterling. Did we back in the days, we didn't even have statements, we didn't have representatives, but I do understand that they have to find their position because now they just moved around in the system and being a business issue. So this is very bad for Chelsea Football Club.
How do you build success with this as your backdrop?
I'm not at all sure. Listen, on the one hand, I kind of like what Maresca said, and I kind of like his positioning in that he's a counter to Todd Bowley and the Chelsea ownership. Somebody just needed to kind of make the point that what's happening over there in terms of your buying of players is ridiculous. And from a footballing perspective, I have to be able to work with a squad of a certain size. The trouble with that is you have these players, and while you can take the position, well, it's not my money, you can sign them to 6- and 7-year contracts if you want, or 20-year contracts if you want. I'm not paying them, that's on you. And in theory, you say, well, those players aren't a part of my training, of my sessions. There is inevitable overlap. You can keep them or you can send them to train with the kids, you can send them to train somewhere else, but there will be inevitable overlap between the players who are in your 20 and the players who aren't. And that is when it gets really difficult in terms of the culture of that football club. The other issue here is that if Chelsea don't get off to a flying start, if Chelsea suffer an injury crisis, and all of a sudden you need to call on the Chilwells or the Raheem Sterlings or whoever else is in that 20 who've been ostracized, that kind of doubles down on the toxicity coming into that dressing room. And that makes it all the harder. You cannot now put your arm around and say, Raheem, remember what I said back in August? Never mind that. We're best friends now. That's off the table. And so, while, again, I think Maresca and his positioning is needed from a footballing sense, just in terms of Chelsea longer term, I'm not sure how it works. I'm not sure how it gets better.
Can I just say, Shaq, that I understand that Maresca has to take a position in terms of this is the squad that I'm working with. But to your point, he's actually cornering himself to a point to where now is dependent upon results, as it always is. As it always is, because all of this is fine and well. But if Chelsea, as you just mentioned, don't get to the flying start, in fact, if they start losing game after game after game, now he doesn't have wiggle room. He doesn't have space to where he can go lean on those players that you've already said, nah, they're not for me. The truth of the matter is that the guys that you're working with haven't proven that they can be good enough to go on and win games consistently. And so to then turn your back on those guys that are in purgatory, now you've really put yourself in a position in which is this 21 or it isn't.